Well, hello. Welcome to Read Aloud number 6, which is for Monday, September 21st. I didn't have a whole lot of time to practice guitar this weekend, but I just came up with a cool new rhythm that I'm gonna work on. It kind of goes like. Something like that. It goes. I think it sounds pretty cool. Okay, here we go. Where were we? Okay. To think it will soon be June, grumbled Bilbo as he splashed along behind the others in a very muddy track. It was after tea time. It was pouring with rain. It had been all day. His hood was dripping into his eyes. His cloak was full of water. The pony was tired and stumbled on stones, and the others were too grumpy to talk. And I'm sure the rain has got into the dry clothes and into the food bags, thought Bilbo. Bother burgling and everything to do with it. I wish I was at home in my nice hole by the fire with the kettle just beginning to sing. It was not the last time that he had wished that. Still, the dwarves jogged on, never turning round or taking any notice of the Hobbit. Somewhere behind the gray clouds the sun must have gone down, for it began to get dark as they went down into a deep valley with a river at the bottom. Wind got up and willows along its banks bent and sighed. Fortunately, the road went over an ancient stone bridge, for the river was swollen with rains came rushing down from the hills and mountains in the north. It was nearly night when they had crossed over. The wind broke up the gray clouds, and a wandering moon appeared above the hills between the flying rags. Then they stopped, and Thorin muttered something about supper, and where shall we get a dry patch to sleep on? Not until then did they notice that Gandalf was missing. So far he had come all the way with them, never saying if he was in the adventure or merely keeping them company for a while. He had eaten most, talked most, and laughed most, but now he simply was not there at all. Just when a wizard would have been useful too, groaned Dori and Nori, who shared the Hobbit's views about regular meals plenty and often. They decided in the end that they would have to camp where they were. They moved to a clump of trees, and though it was drier under them, the wind shook the rain off the leaves, and the drip drip was most annoying. Also, the mischief seemed to have got into the fire. Dwarves can make a fire almost anywhere out of almost anything, wind or no wind, but they could not do it that night, not even Oin and Gloin, who were especially good at it. Then one of the ponies took fright at nothing and bolted. He got into the river before they could catch him, and before they could get him out again, Feely and Keely were nearly drowned, and all the baggage that he carried was washed away off of him. Of course, it was mostly food, and there was mighty little left for supper and less for breakfast. There they sat, all glum and wet and muttering, while Oin and Gloin went on trying to light the fire and quarreling about it. Bilbo was sadly reflecting that adventures are not all pony rides and May sunshine, when Balin, who was always their lookout man, said, "There's a light over there." There was a hill some way off with trees on it, pretty thick in parts. Out of the dark mass of the trees they could now see a light shining, a reddish, comfortable-looking light, as it might be a fire or torches twinkling. When they had looked at it for some while, they fell to arguing. Some said no, and some said yes. Some said they could but go and see, and anything was better than a little supper, less breakfast, and wet clothes all night. Others said, these parts are none too well known and are too near the mountains. Travelers seldom come this way now. The old maps are of no use. Things have changed for the worse, and the road is unguarded. They have seldom even heard of the king around here, and the less inquisitive you are as you go along, the less trouble you are likely to find. Some said, after all, there are 14 of us. Others said, where has Gandalf got to? This remark was repeated by everybody. And then the rain began to pour down worse than ever, and Oin and Gloin began to fight. That settled it. After all, we have got a burglar with us, they said, and so they made off, leading their ponies with all due and proper caution in the direction of the light. They came to the hill and were soon in the wood. Up the hill they went, but there was no proper path to be seen, such as might lead them to a house or a farm, and do what they could, they made a deal of rustling and crackling and creaking. and a good deal of grumbling and dratting as they went through the trees in the pitch dark. Suddenly, the red light shone out very bright through the tree trunks not far ahead. "Now it is the burglar's turn," they said, meaning Bilbo. "You must go on and find out all about that light, what it is for, and if all is perfectly safe and canny," said Thorin to the hobbit. "Now scuttle off, and come back quick if all is well. If not, come back if you can. If you can't, hoot twice like a barn owl and once like a screech owl, and we will do what we can." Off Bilbo had to go. Before he could explain that he could not hoot even once like any kind of owl, any more than fly like a bat. But at any rate, hobbits can move quietly in the woods, absolutely quietly. They take pride in it, and Bilbo had sniffed more than once at what he called all that dwarfish racket. As they went along, though, I don't suppose you or I would have noticed anything at all on a windy night, not if the whole cavalcade had passed 2 feet off. As for Bilbo walking primly towards the red light, I don't suppose even a weasel would have stirred a whisker at it. So naturally, he got right up to the fire, for fire it was, without disturbing anyone. And this is what he saw. 3 very large persons sitting round a very large fire of beech logs. They were toasting mutton on long spits of wood and licking the gravy off their fingers. There was a fine, toothsome smell. Also, there was a barrel of good drink at hand, and they were drinking out of jugs. But they were trolls, obviously trolls. Even Bilbo, in spite of his sheltered life, could see that. For the great heavy faces of them and their sizes and their shape of their legs, not to mention their language, which was not drawing room fashion at all. "Mutton yesterday, mutton today, and blimey if it don't look like mutton again tomorrow," said one of the trolls. "Never a blinking bit of man flesh have we had for long enough," said a second. "What the hell William was a-thinking of to bring us into these parts at all beats me, and the drink running short, what's more," he said, jogging the elbow of William, who was taking a pull on his jug. William choked. "Shut your mouth," he said as soon as he could. "You can't expect folk to stop here just to be eaten by you, Bert. You eat a village and a half between you since we come down from the mountains. How much more do you want? And times have been up our way. Wouldn't you have to say thank your Bill for a nice bit of Fat Valley mutton like was this?" He took a bite off the sheep's leg he was roasting and wiped his lips on his sleeve. "Yes, I'm afraid trolls do behave like that, even those with only 1 head each." After hearing all this, Bilbo ought to have done something at once. Either he should have gone back quietly and warned his friends that there were 3 fair-sized trolls at hand in a nasty mood, quite likely to try roasted dwarf or even pony for a change. Or else he should have done a bit of good quick burglaring. A really first-class and legendary burglar would at this point have picked the troll's pockets. It is nearly always worth the while if you can manage it. Pinched the very mutton off the spits, purloined the beer, and walked off without their noticing him. Others, more practical but with less professional pride, would have stuck a dagger into each of them before they observed it. Then the night could have been spent cheerily. Bilbo knew it. He had read a good many things he had never seen or done. He was very much alarmed as well as disgusted. He wished himself 100 miles away, and yet somehow he could not go straight back to Thorin and company empty-handed. So he stood and hesitated in the shadows. Of the various burglarious proceedings he had heard of, picking the troll's pockets seemed like the least difficult. So at last he crept behind a tree just behind William. Bert and Tom went off the barrel. William was having another drink, and then Bilbo plucked up a courage and put his little hand into William's enormous pocket. There was a purse in it as big as a bag to Bilbo. "Ha!" thought he warming to his new work as he lifted it carefully out. "This is a beginning." It was. Trolls' purses are their mischief, and this was no exception. "Who are you?" it squeaked as it left the pocket, and William turned around at once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind a tree. "Blimey, Bert, look what I've copped," said William. "What is it?" said the others, coming up. "Let me know. If I knows, what are you?" "Bilbo Baggins, or a hobbit," said poor Bilbo, shaking all over and wondering how to make owl noises before they throttled him. "Bert, a hobbit," said they, a bit startled. Trolls are slow in the uptake and mighty suspicious about anything new to them. What's a burra hobbit got to do with my pockets anyway, said Williams. And can you cook 'em, said Tom. You can try, said Bert, picking up a skewer. He wouldn't make above a mouthful, said William, who had already had a fine supper, not when he was skinned and boned. Perhaps there are more like him round about, and we might make a pie, said Bert. Here you, are there any more of your sorts a sneaking in these here woods, you nasty little hobbit? Said he, looking at the hobbit's furry feet, and he picked him up by the toes and shook him. Yes, lots, said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give his friends away. No, none at all, not one. And he said immediately afterwards, What do you mean, said Bert, holding him right away by the hair this time. What I say, said Bilbo, gasping, and please don't cook me, kind sirs. I am a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook. If you see what I mean, I'll cook beautifully for you, a perfectly beautiful breakfast for you, if only you won't have me for supper. Poor little blighter, said William. He had already had as much supper as he could hold. Also, he had lots of beer. Poor little blighter, let him go. Not till he says what he means by lots and none at all, said Bert. I don't want to have me throat cut in my sleep. Hold his toes in the fire till he talks. I won't have it, said William. I caught him anyway. You're a fat fool, William, said Bert, as I've said afore this evening, and you're a lout. And I won't take that from you, Bill Huggins, said Bert, and put his fist in William's eye. Then there was a gorgeous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him on the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs and calling one another all sorts of perfectly true and applicable names in a very loud voice. Soon they were locked into one another's arms and rolling nearly into the fire, kicking and thumping, while Tom whacked at them both with a branch to bring them to their senses, and that, of course, only made them madder than ever. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left, but his poor little feet had been squashed under Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round, and so there he lay for a while, panting, just outside the circle of the firelight. I will pause there, but there is a good picture. I always like this part of the book. Okay, we'll read more tomorrow. Bye.